Well, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Doug Masterson, and I'm here with Dr. Christy Oberst, and we're going to cover the GEC updates on advising guidance that was hosted here on Hattiesburg last Friday and was just finished up at the Gulf Park campus on Monday. So for any of you who could not attend, we are making this recording to give you all the latest and greatest information regarding the GEC updates that I'm sure you all are aware of. So I'm going to turn it over to Christy now.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much. I am going to tell you a little bit about an overview of what is changing in the GEC, as well as focus on the advising impacts. When we talk about the advising impacts, we will shift from the incoming students and then talk a little bit about existing students, so you'll know how these two groups are different. We'll jump right in. There are three areas of GEC that are updated for the 26-27 bulletin year. That is GEC 01, our written communication section, GEC 02, our natural science section, and then our GEC 03, humanities. And we'll talk about each of these more in depth here. So to start us off with GEC 01, written communication, this is what most of us refer to as our composition requirements, or our English 101 and English 102 requirements. The changes here are in regards to the placement level. And so historically, USM held a placement score that was above and beyond what the state IHL requirements were. And what has happened with this 26-27 bulletin year changes is we have reduced that placement score to allow the ACT and SAT scores to align with the IHL standard and mandate for those who are needing composition support. So those going into English 100E, for example, that ACT placement score is lowered to 17. Along with that change, we also have course caps that we anticipate being lowered, and so the class sizes will be a little bit smaller to account for additional support. We also have been advised that there will be a new course developed called English 103. This will be specifically for additional support for those students who might be in English 101 and at interim are struggling or finding that they are not being as successful as need be. That course is not at this moment, at this recording, on the books yet, but is in development. And so we anticipate to see more information about that in the coming weeks. On this section, when you look at the DPR, there really are not going to be any changes. And so the placement is going to be the change. That's going to be things that impact from service indicators, the course catalog, and what is in SOAR to allow a student to register. But the DPR on the section remains the same. In GEC 02, the natural science area, we have some really big changes to note. What historically was requiring 8 hours or 2 lectures plus labs is now changing to be reduced to a requirement of 6 hours total for the section. We are still expecting students to complete 2 of the approved course options, but the way that looks can be quite different depending on what the student selects. I'm going to walk through the table that you can see on the slides. We're going to start with that second row. And specifically, this is a set of classes that are dropping the lab requirement. And so that's starting with AST 111 and going through PSC 190. These courses historically had a 3 credit hour lecture and a 1 credit hour lab. Moving forward, starting with the fall 2026, that lab co-requisite is removed, and the lab may or may not even be available in offerings. You're also going to notice at the bottom of the middle column that there's a GLY 110 set out to the side, and it indicates that it is a proposed new course. This course is something that is being packaged or presented as a proposed new course. It's not yet, as of this recording, available, but it is in motion through the curriculum process to be offered and added into this category. So again, this set of classes will be offered as a lecture only at 3 student credit hours with no lab requirement at all. Moving on to the next row, so the lighter row, this set of classes, they are keeping the lab requirement. However, they are changing the lecture to reduce to 2 credit hours instead of 3. And so this set is changing to a 2-1 model instead of the 3-1 model. This includes our Biology 103 and Biology 107 plus labs. And then again, you're going to see another class that is a proposed new course, Bio 104 and lab. It is, again, not yet, as of this recording, available because it is going through the curriculum and approval process now. For these, a special note to understand is that the lab section, while a separate course, is going to be offered as an asynchronous online lab class. That means that it does not have a meeting pattern. It will be fully online for the students, which hopefully will allow for more flexibility in scheduling. One question that arose during the sessions is a question in regards to if the lecture component was also going to be online so that students could take advantage of both sections, both options online. That information is not yet determined, according to Dr. Winstead, Dean of College of Arts and Sciences. However, we anticipate that there could be some online and some in person. We absolutely anticipate that some of the Bio 103 and 107 and then eventually 104 will be in person with just the lab online. So what the offerings look like could vary. Pay attention to the course catalog and the course schedule for that information. Another thing to note is, as of this recording, none of these are actually on the schedule for fall 2026 because of the need to change them from a 3-1 to a 2-1 and to eliminate or avoid any confusion or issues with students registering for one class and it being changed in the future. They are waiting to add those courses to the schedule until the changes take effect. And so hopefully those will be coming online in the coming weeks and months. The last category of our GEC 02 changes is a set of classes that essentially are remaining unchanged at the class level. So the course itself will continue to be a 3-1 model where there's a 3 credit hour lecture and a 1 credit hour lab, and they are required as co-requisites to be registered and dropped together. What's important to note about these is that while they are required together, the GEC will only be looking for the 3 credit hour lecture class. In other words, in the GEC section of the DPR, you're only going to see it looking for Bio 110, 110, for example, and it's not going to be paying attention to the lab. You may wonder where that lab is going to go. If there's a DEG requirement, then that lab will show up in that section. If there's not, and the student is simply electing to take that class, it will fall into the general electives. The student will still get credit for all of the hours that they're enrolled in that, and it's going to continue to be a requirement, again, for registration or for dropping or withdrawing, but you are not going to see it's populating into the GEC area. Now moving into the third category for GEC 03 Humanities. The Humanities historically, and let's speak from the DPR perspective, was split into 3 subcategories. GEC 03A, which you see in the table as Literature, English 203. GEC 03B, History, where the student had to select either World Civ 1 or World Civ 2. And then a GEC 03C elective category where the student had the option to select an additional class not yet taken from the humanities. What's changing about this category is instead of being 3 separate subcategories, it will move in the 26-27 bulletin and forward to be available as one full set of course options. The students will be required to take 2 approved courses, so that's 6 credit hours as opposed to the 9 previously required. And the only stipulation is that they're taking 2 different prefixes. You'll also note in the comments off to the left that Humanities 201 and 202 are being removed from the list. And you'll also see some notes in that full set in the 26-27 options. Number 1, you'll notice that English 205 is a new addition being added. This is another literature option for students to select. You also notice that History 103 is a proposed addition for a future bulletin year, so not 26-27, but the next year. So we anticipate that coming and with more information in the year to come. History 104 is a new addition to this GEC category set of options. This is an option that you may have historically seen it as History 204. And so whether you see it in someone's DPR or course history or in SOAR offerings as History 204 or 104, that course is one and the same, and it will populate as such in the DPR. And then finally, at the very bottom of the list, you see a Religion 200 something. That is a proposed addition for the 27-28 bulletin year with more details to come. So let's talk about impact to advising. Specifically, let's start with our incoming students, those students who are starting in the fall of 2026. Students who are a traditional first-year freshmen, that means they are attending USM as their first college experience after the high school diploma. These are going to be a very simple and straightforward experience. You're going to follow the bulletin and the DPR. Really, there will be very little to no exceptions or kind of if-then scenarios for this set of students, because everything will be set up already in the DPR and you can follow it accordingly. When it comes to the second row with Mississippi Community College transfer with an Associate of Arts or Associate of Science degree, you're going to continue to see that GEC 01 through 06 is satisfied, so there's really no change that you're doing there either, because that area is already good to go. With the third set of students, our Mississippi Community College transfer students who come in with a completed Associate of Applied Science degree, we are going to continue to serve them in the same way we have been serving them, that they can follow that IHL core set of requirements. Once they come in and they have completed the relevant IHL core requirements at USM, anything that's outstanding once they get here, you'll submit GEC substitutions or waivers as appropriate. So truly, if you've been working with this subset of students, nothing is really changing about what's required or expected of them. How we function with them will be the same. This last category of students, there will be a little bit of difference, but when we think about transfer students from other institutions, whether that is a Mississippi college that is a 4-year institution in Mississippi, or if something is outside of Mississippi, or you're looking at students who are coming in with dual credit and AP scores, etc., really, we're going to follow the spirit of this new GEC. You're going to see that populated in their DPR, and anytime that you find an appropriate area that should be substituted or waived, you'll complete a GEC substitution just as you would at any other time. We'll move now into talking about existing students, the students who have attended USM prior to the fall of 2026. For this set of students, we understand that USM has limited resources. We cannot necessarily carry 2 GECs at the very same time because that would be a significant increase to our course offerings and cause some confusion. We also want to allow students to benefit from this update to the GEC. So we are asking advisors to align advisement to the new GEC patterns, even for these current students who were following bulletin years prior to fall 2026. Here's what that looks like in the DPR. In GEC 01, there are no DPR changes, and so there's really nothing that will change about the advisement from the DPR standpoint. However, the placement of these students, we will certainly have to work with our campus partners across our humanities and our English area, as well as registrar, to help facilitate those changes. With GEC 02, the DPR is going to appear unchanged. It's going to show you the same science and lab options that it showed you any other time. It's going to follow what shows you in the bulletin. However, there are hidden requirement options in the DPR that will satisfy according to the new requirements. So for example, once a student takes let's say AST 111, just the lecture in the fall of 2026, but they're in a current bulletin, let's say fall 25-26, it's going to show that area as satisfied for one of those two options. There should be no issues that you need to seek out a substitution or a waiver for the GEC-02, as it will satisfy according to these new requirements. So hopefully that is a huge benefit to advisors. And then the GEC-03 is a little bit more complicated and more complex in the DPR setup. Because of it moving from 3 separate subcategories now into one full category, you will need to complete a GEC substitution in SOAR to request appropriate waivers. For example, once a student who is currently here completes 2 of the humanities options, and they have that third area that's still outstanding or not satisfied, you would complete a GEC course substitution in SOAR to request a waiver, indicating that you are aligning it to the new 26-27 GEC and identify the 2 humanities they have already completed successfully. Doug, do you want to say another bit about the 2? For example, if they completed 2 histories?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So if we have a student in a prior to Fall 26 bulletin, and they've completed, for example, 2 histories, they've completed 6 hours in GEC-03, we will allow that to count for the GEC, because we're, again, as Christy mentioned, we're following the spirit of the new GEC, and we don't want to hold students accountable to having to go back and complete that second prefix unnecessarily here. So in those particular cases, you'll want to make sure that you put in a sub for that, so that we can, or a waiver. I'm trying to remember, is it a waiver or sub? It's a waiver. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you'll have to put in a waiver for that particular request.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I know a lot of times that waiver option can be a little bit trickier to find because it's not a common option that we use. However, it is in the sub form, but you select waiver within the form. If you have any questions about that, always reach out to your DPS and we can guide you on that appropriately. All right. So moving into a few final notes, I'm going to cover what's on the screen and then also cover a few questions that have come up in our sessions. One, please understand that only the GEC area of the DPR is changing. No DEG requirements have changed as a result of the GEC updates. The only way that DEG changes are going to happen is if that runs through the academic councils and curriculum process that is traditionally required. If you notice that there are concerns about the DEG setup as it relates to GEC changes, reach out and let's start a conversation. You can reach out to me and I'll be happy to talk with you about what that means. Also, please note that for those classes that dropped the lab requirement in the GEC-02 set, those lab co-requisites have already been decoupled in SOAR, so once we start registration here in just a few days, you should have no issues in getting students registered for that lecture only for that set that are going to move to lecture only. Another thing that is a great tip to consider, if your degree plan, your major, has not had major curriculum changes over the past few years, it may be in your best interest to allow our current students and recent students to move into the new bulletin year. If we suggest that they have a bulletin year change to the 26-27 bulletin, that will allow all of these changes to automatically take effect, and then that alleviates the need to figure out what course subs or waivers may be necessary. Now, take into consideration that you'll have to know your degree plans very well and understand if there might be other impacts that negatively kind of impact that student if new requirements are going to crop up for them. So take that into consideration. A few other questions that have arisen that I want to cover. One, the question about readmitted students. Would substitutions be appropriate for GEC-03 for readmitted students? The answer is absolutely yes. So what we did is in GEC-02, the DPR is set up to kind of in the background, hidden, allow the new science requirements to take effect retroactively. This is set up all the way back to fall of 2020. It's not that we didn't want it to also apply to previous students, but these are our current and active bulletin years at this time. And so we limit any changes to history when it comes to DPR setup, as that becomes risky. However, even if you are working with a student who has, let's say, an extended bulletin cycle, they've been allowed to extend that, please know we still want them to honor the new GEC, and so that just may mean additional course subs or waivers being requested. If you have questions about that, reach out to your DPS. They can offer some guidance, and I'm also happy to help. When it comes to students who have again, that lab that is no longer necessary for the GEC, there was a question about what happens with that. Let me reiterate that that goes into general electives. Even for the few degree plans and majors that we do not necessarily have general electives noted specifically on the DPR. For example, there are some majors that use up every credit hour a student needs, and so that category may not be showing. It still counts in the overall undergraduate credit hours for the student. And so it does effectively count as general electives. There were also questions about if History 201 and 202, which has historically been allowed for our transfer students coming from Mississippi Community College, who were allowed to take that as part of the core at the community college, if that would still be allowed in GEC 03, the answer is yes. Historical articulations for our transfer students are unchanged at this time. So we are still allowing those courses to come in and satisfied because they have been articulated to do so. And so that is automatically set up as well. There was a question about getting a sample course sub for GEC 03 for the instance where a waiver is necessary, so you can see kind of how simplified and streamlined that can be. We will be providing that very soon, so keep your eye out for that information. I believe that covers most of the questions. If there are any additional questions, please feel welcome to reach out again to myself, Christy Oberst. It's christy.oberst@usm.edu, and I'm more than happy to field those questions. Thank you so much.